President Joe Biden will tell the American people what a great job he's done. He will read a speech, and seated behind him will be Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Kamala Harris. Not even the most extreme Democratic partisan could believe that the last 14 months have been a success. Joe Biden campaigned for president as a reasonable and centrist moderate, and he abandoned every one of those promises the moment he put his hand on the Bible. Instead, he has handed the agenda over to the most radical and extreme voices on the far left, and the result for the country has been disastrous. In 14 months, we've seen trillions in new spending and trillions in new debt, the highest debt in the history of our nation. We've seen a war on domestic energy production. In his first week in office, Joe Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline, destroying 11,000 jobs, destroying 8,000 union jobs. He halted new leasing on federal lands and offshore drilling, and the predictable result of launching an assault on domestic energy production is that energy prices skyrocketed. But for that matter, everything has skyrocketed. Food, electricity, rent, home, lumber, gasoline, heat, every basic expense. Working families are suffering, and especially seniors, especially those on fixed income. Then we have our southern border, the absolute chaos and crisis on our southern border. Over 2 million people crossing illegally into this country, the worst rate of illegal immigration in 61 years. And it's worth noting that Biden inherited the year before the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. So he turned success into failure because he implemented the radical left-wing ideas of open borders from the extreme left. The crime and chaos and disease coming from 2 million illegal immigrants is compounded domestically by the extreme left's war on the police. We've seen the far left advocating abolishing the police, advocating defunding the police. We've seen George Soros-funded district attorneys releasing violent criminals, and as a result, crime is up, murders are up, carjacking is up. And the Biden administration has embraced that radical agenda, nominating not one but two of the leading advocates of abolishing the police to senior positions in the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, every single Democrat in this chamber voted to confirm those leading advocates for abolishing the police. We've seen Joe Biden implementing illegal and unconstitutional vaccine mandates, standing up and firing soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, advocating that doctors be fired, that nurses be fired, that police officers be fired, that firefighters be fired, that airline captains and flight attendants be fired. An assault on our liberties, and Madam President, as disastrous as the domestic policy has been, as disastrous as the economic policy has been, the foreign policy has been even worse. We saw in Afghanistan the catastrophic withdrawal, the surrender to the Taliban, leaving Americans behind. And unfortunately, when that happened, every enemy of America, they looked to Washington, they looked to the Oval Office, they took the measure of the man in the Oval Office. And they all concluded the president was weak and feckless and ineffective. As I said at the time, when we withdrew from Afghanistan, the chances of Russia invading Ukraine have increased tenfold. As I said at the time, the chances of China invading Taiwan have increased tenfold. When the president is weak, when he's ineffective, our enemies are on advance. And every region of the world you look at is worse for America. Russia has launched the largest war in Europe since World War II. China is more aggressive, is running concentration camps with 1 million Uyghurs, is murdering and torturing innocent people in China. And mind you, Madam President, when I brought a vote to the Senate floor that said the United States government should not purchase goods manufactured using slave labor in Chinese concentration camps, every Democrat but one voted no. These are extreme positions. This is not the mainstream. This is not the center. This is the radical and extreme left. Nancy Pelosi will not portray it on her face, but she knows in January she will no longer be Speaker of the House. And I will say Joe Biden's becoming president was the best thing that ever happened to Vladimir Putin. Biden began his presidency by surrendering to Putin, waiving the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, bipartisan sanctions that I authored, that had stopped that pipeline, that had stopped an invasion of Ukraine. And Biden decided surrendering to our adversary was a better policy. As Neville Chamberlain has demonstrated, appeasement doesn't work. The state of America is strong, but the state of the Union and the state of the federal government in Washington is disastrous. But the one bit of bright light on the horizon that I'm confident President Biden will not point to is that the American people will vote in November, and I believe they will change the path we're on. We've seen the disaster of the extreme radical left. If Biden could remember the Joe Biden of old, the Joe Biden that swore me into office, the Joe Biden that swore many of my colleagues into office, the Joe Biden that we served with, if he could remember that Joe Biden, it would be a very different administration. But sadly, this White House has decided the radical, extreme, socialist left sets the agenda. And the results of that agenda are playing out for families all across the country. I yield the floor.